So from I stopped, it is also a good idea to plan your animation with simpler forms and have sure that animation is what you want before fully committing and drawing your whole character doing that movement. So for example, if you have a walk cycle, as I said, usually walk cycle floats between 6 and 12 frames per second. If I want make something walk before I do the whole character moving and try to make it believable, a walking cycle, I could, for example, plan my whole movement. I might use this black sphere as the head and do something like this. So for example, this is the head moving around. I might want the right hand as this orange ball in something like this. And this red as the left one. So AdamCYounis talked about this technique. How could we transmit a walk cycle with this kind of planning? We also have the recycle of frames. So for example, if you are making a movement, this happens a lot in anime, for example, where a set amount of frames is actually, for example, mirrored or just offsetted a bit. So actually you does not need to make every single frame for the same movement or similar movements, for example. You also could make animations by hand and drawing the frame sequence and pass it to the digital. And usually you have a sort of iteration set. So first you check the previous keyframe and the next one you animate the between, you check the overall animation and adjust, and you go in this cycle and on and on and on. And after you make these animations, I do recommend you to question about two things. So first, the evaluation. If you have a really great reference, so for example, Puss in Boots 2 is a great animation. So if you had, for example, one of the animators that worked in that animation as your tutor, and this reference is checking upon your work, what they would suggest, how they would evaluate, what they would change in order to make your animation better, for example. This is a great way to criticize your artwork without being biased because it's not exactly you, and actually get better because that one who is judging your art actually is a great inspiration. So actually your style is really affected by this person, and then you reflect what you learned from this art. What is the hardest part? What was the easiest part? What worked greatly? What worked badly? What you would do differently is a great way and questions in order to improve animation and actually pixel art and art in general. Now the last thing is about micro animation. So when I started to make pixel art, there was an artist called Fleja or Fleja or Fleja, and that guy was such an inspiration for me back then. I really loved his pixel art posted in a pixel gallery called pixelart, and I was like, holy shit, how did he make this such a thing? It was so cool, and he from time to time shared some planning of his pixel art. And when I studied back then, I started to notice something that I called now as micro animations. That is, even though this whole pixel art is feeling really vivid, most part of these animations is actually pretty simple. For example, these stars is actually just shrink and expanding. This lantern is just emitting sort of aura from the light. The house and this tree, for example, is just emitting particles. These torches and these clouds or smokes are just emitting waves or something like this. Even though the whole piece is really vivid, most part of the actions in here are just smaller pixel animations. So I categorized micro animations in we have sparks and particles, flashing, shrinking and expanding, blinking, ripping laces, floating or wiggle or tremble, and the emitting aura. Alright? As I said, even though this whole piece is feeling like very vivid, most part of the action is actually pretty small and simple to replicate. So this is my suggestion. The totally the opposite of my first suggestion in this playlist, that is, if you are want to make pixel art, you should start in a bigger canvas. In animation, actually I do recommend you to start in smaller canvas because animation is really hard, timing consuming, and there are a lot of things that you will need to get the hang of it. And if you try to do, for example, an animation with 260 by 260 pixel canvas size, the chance that you are not able to transmit what you want is really big. So in order to actually polishing your skills into creating the illusion of movement, I recommend actually first animate in a smaller canvas. As I said, it's the opposite suggestion of static images. In static pixel art, I suggest a bigger canvas, and in animation, I suggest you to start with smaller and simple movements. So guys, we are almost ending this playlist. I really shared the most things that I could, basically everything that I know about pixel art, about animation, I shared with you. It is really important in order to get better studying, read articles, watching tutorials, and practice, mainly practice, and not only from my sources, but actually I do so part to watch other tutors, other YouTube channels, other articles. I say that I started this pixel art playlist because I was really tired of clickbaiting, but most part of the channels don't do this, just a smaller part. And I support animation tutorials not only related to pixel art but animation in general because what I talked in these last videos actually is just a small part of this iceberg that is animation, that is actually a whole industry. Keep on improving, keep in practice because it doesn't matter what you believe about talent. Everyone can be good in pixel art by practice. That's it. I hope you enjoyed our journey. Alright, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.